The lemon-frosted sheet cake says, "Happy Retirement, Tessa," in blue icing, with a frosting rose jammed between my name and the plastic gold clock. Uncle Grant stands at the head of the restaurant table and taps his water glass with a butter knife. "We're celebrating her retirement today," he announces. I'm 21 and no one warned me. 18 people from Pike Exhaust stop eating. Luis lowers a French fry. My mother, seated across from me, looks from the cake to Grant, as if she has missed a line in a conversation. Grant reaches toward the cheap gold watch beside his plate. "Stay seated," I say. He pauses. A cream-colored envelope lies beside the watch. I put it there while Grant was arguing with the hostess about our reservation. His name is written across the front in my red China marker. He picks it up. Inside is a copy of the offer I signed that morning. Bellwether Dining Group's letterhead is at the top. My signature is at the bottom. Between them are my start date, my new position, and the authority delegated to me by Bellwether's chief operating officer. Grant reads the first page twice. Then he looks at me. "What did you do?" 6 weeks earlier, Grant was on the roof of a steakhouse in Allentown, singing into an industrial exhaust fan. He did that when he wanted everyone to know he was in a good mood. His voice came down the ductwork into the kitchen, distorted by 40 feet of greasy galvanized steel. "Is that Bon Jovi?" I asked. Luis Ortega tilted his head toward the hood. "It was once. It was 2:13 in the morning. The steakhouse had closed at 11, but the manager had forgotten to leave the roof key in the lockbox. We'd spent 43 minutes waiting in the loading area beside stacked beer kegs, while Grant called everyone he knew. When the manager finally returned, wearing sweatpants and one dress shoe, Grant greeted him like they were old friends meeting for golf. That was Grant's gift. He could make irritation feel like a shared adventure, especially when the other person controlled a contract. Luis and his crew had already wrapped the cook line in plastic. Aluminum panels leaned against milk crates. A pump sprayer hissed near the fryers, and the kitchen smelled of hot degreaser, old onions, and the citrus sanitizer the night manager had sloshed across the floor before leaving. I stood at the stainless prep counter checking the job packet. 11 before photos, roof access at 12:47, 2 loose fan belts, heavy grease in the horizontal duct over the charbroiler. One hinge kit bent badly enough that Luis had to brace the fan with a length of wood. "Don't mark fan 2 complete," he told me. "We cleaned what we could reach, but I'm not putting Mateo under that housing again." I wrote hinge repair required on the yellow service sheet. Grant came through the back door 5 minutes later, carrying the broken hinge pin between 2 fingers. "Souvenir," he said, dropping it beside my clipboard. "Put them down for a replacement kit." Luis already did. "Then why do you look like the city inspector?" I'm thinking. At 2 in the morning? Dangerous habit. He took my red China marker and drew a smiley face in the margin of the packet. Grant was 48, broad through the shoulders with silver starting at his temples in a way that looked expensive. Even on job sites, his polo stayed tucked in. He had built Pike Exhaust from one borrowed pressure washer and a van whose passenger door opened only from the outside. He mentioned that van whenever anyone questioned his judgment. "You know what Bellwether is?" he asked. "A restaurant group. 42 restaurants. 38. 4 are licensed locations." He pointed my marker at me. "This is why you're terrifying." Luis glanced over from the sink. "She's terrifying because she labels the stapler." People kept moving it. Grant handed back the marker. Bellwether sent an invitation to bid. "Full exhaust service. Every location. If we land it, we jump a whole weight class. We need another crew. We land it, we hire one. We need to train one before we land it." Grant smiled. "There she is. 21 going on 63. It was an old joke by then. I liked labeled drawers, paper backups, and arriving early enough that being on time couldn't become a discussion. Grant called me Grandma Tessa when I reminded him that a restaurant manager's verbal okay did not replace a signature. The nickname bothered me less than the way people sometimes laughed before checking whether he was kidding. I capped the marker. How tight is the service window? Proposal's not due until Friday. That isn't what I asked. His smile shifted just slightly. Above us, the fan spun clean and dark against the night sky. Grant looked toward the hood, calculating something he wasn't ready to share. "We'll talk in the morning," he said. Morning at Pike Exhaust began at 9, which was generous considering half the company had gone to bed at 5. Our office occupied the front of a cinder-block building behind a flooring warehouse. The back held chemical drums, replacement filters, belts, scrapers, and enough plastic sheeting to wrap a house. My mother was already at her desk when I arrived at 9:12 with 2 coffees. "You're late," she said. "I left here 4 hours ago. Grant's been here since 8. Grant sang into a fan for 20 minutes and went home before cleanup. She accepted the coffee. That sounds restorative. My mother, Claire, had worked for Grant for 9 years and had perfected a voice that could make criticism sound like a weather report. She wore reading glasses on a chain and kept a ceramic bowl of peppermints beside the payroll printer. People confess things while taking peppermints: missed shifts, damaged equipment, divorces, gambling debts. One crew member had once admitted to backing a van through a loading dock door before Grant even knew the van was gone. She studied me over the rim of her cup. He told me about Bellwether. He told me 42 locations, 42 invoices, 38 exhaust systems. Let him enjoy the 4. Grant called us into the conference room at 10. The room had 6 chairs, a television that turned everything green, and a framed photograph of Grant beside the original van. Wade Mercer from sales was there, spreading proposal pages across the table. Wade was 34 and handsome in the polished, symmetrical way that made restaurant owners assume he had brought good news. He knew the square footage and annual revenue of every chain within 100 miles. He also used the phrase pain point when he meant problem. Bellwether's pain point is inconsistency, he said. They currently have 5 vendors, 5 sets of invoices, 5 contacts, 5 standards. And 5 crews, I said. Grant leaned back. We have 4. We have 3.5. Vernon's crew loses Thursdays when he does filter exchange. Then we restructure. Wade slid a spreadsheet toward me. This is the route density. The cells were color-coded by region. It looked convincing until I read the times. You have Easton finishing at 1 and starting Bethlehem at 1:15. 15 minutes between locations. It's 28 minutes without traffic. They also have to reel hoses, bag the waste, load the machine, and get the manager's signature. We can adjust details after award, Wade said. These are the details. Grant tapped the table twice. What do you need? It was one of the reasons I had stayed with him. When Grant wanted an answer, he could clear the air around it. A 5th crew trained for 4 weeks. 2 more pressure washers. Approval to schedule the charcoal grill locations separately. And I need Bellwether's roof access list before I commit to dates. What if you don't get all of that? Then we phase the rollout. Wade looked at Grant. Our advantage is single vendor coverage. Phasing weakens that. Promising work we can't do weakens it more. Grant's eyes stayed on the spreadsheet. Build both versions. For the next 4 days, I built the honest schedule and Wade built the beautiful one. Mine had travel buffers, equipment limits, known roof restrictions, and 3 locations marked pending site inspection. His had smooth blocks of blue stretching across 12 weeks. Mine required a 5th crew. His required our existing crews to move like they had no knees, no hoses, and no need to sleep. On Friday afternoon, Grant took both schedules into his office and closed the door. At 4:30, he came out holding Wade's. We're going aggressive, he said. How aggressive? 8 weeks. I thought I had misheard him. For all 38? 42. The licensed locations use their own vendors. They're willing to add them if we perform. That's 4 more systems. That's 4 more invoices. My mother called from payroll, trying to make it light. Grant gave her a quick smile. Then he turned back to me. We'll hire once the first payment clears. The first payment is net 30. We have a credit line. Then use it to hire now. Wade's eyebrows rose. Grant's expression didn't change, which was worse. You want me to add payroll before we have a signed contract? He asked. I want the proposal to describe work we can perform. I've been doing this since before you could spell exhaust. The room went still in the quiet, attentive way workplaces do when an argument becomes personal but everyone still has email open. I lowered my voice. Then you know what happens when a crew finds a frozen fan, a locked roof, or a duct nobody measured. I know problems get solved. By time. Which isn't in this schedule. Grant placed the spreadsheet on my desk. Make it work. That night, I stayed until after 11. I shifted routes, paired difficult sites with short ones, flagged 2 rooftop fans that Bellwether's records listed as direct drive even though older photographs showed belts. I called Luis, who was eating dinner and watching a soccer match. How bad? He asked. If everything goes perfectly, bad. And if it goes normally? I looked through the office window into the dark warehouse. Grant's original van was gone, but its bent chrome mirror sat on a shelf above the chemical cage like a religious object. Worse, I said. On Monday, Grant and Wade presented the 8-week schedule. Bellwether awarded us the contract on Wednesday. Grant brought champagne into the office before noon. My mother found paper cups left over from a supplier luncheon, and Wade played music through his phone. Grant poured mine himself. You look like somebody died, he said. We don't have the roof access list. We have the contract. We need both. He touched his cup to mine. You're allowed to win occasionally, Tess. For one afternoon, I tried. The first 2 weeks were ugly but survivable. Luis rebuilt a pump in a parking lot at 3 in the morning. Vernon drove 60 miles to retrieve a roof key that had been left at the wrong location. I learned which Bellwether managers answered texts after midnight and which needed 3 calendar invitations and a printed reminder taped beside the office safe. Dana Cole answered everything. She was Bellwether's facilities director, a compact woman with cropped gray hair and the unnerving habit of reading attachments before meetings. When I sent her a revised route plan, she called 7 minutes later. Why did you move Harrisburg? The roof hatch opens over their prep room. They receive produce on Tuesdays so our hoses would cross the delivery path. Good. Why did your proposal say Tuesday? I didn't write that version. A pause. Did you review it? Yes. Did you approve it? No. That was the first time anyone at Bellwether asked. By week 3, 2 crews were behind. By week 4, the gap had widened to 7 locations. Grant kept selling small jobs between Bellwether nights because we needed cash. Then he booked a hotel group for filter exchanges and took Vernon's crew for 3 Thursdays. I brought him a revised completion forecast. He read the date and pushed the page back. Unacceptable. It's what the hours support. The buyer is reviewing recurring revenue next month. I stared at him. He had never mentioned a buyer. Grant walked to his office door and closed it gently. This is confidential, he said. I have an opportunity to sell a majority stake. That gives me capital to expand. It gives your mother security. It gives everyone here better equipment and actual benefits. And they're evaluating Bellwether. They're evaluating performance. We're 7 locations behind. We are 7 locations behind on service. Billing doesn't need to be. I waited for him to smile. He didn't. You want us to invoice jobs we haven't completed? I want us to invoice the contract schedule and cure the service gap before it matters. It already matters. To whom? The client. The client has clean kitchens and 1 point of contact. Stop acting like we're robbing them. He picked up my revised forecast, folded it once, and slipped it into a drawer. Send billing the scheduled completions, he said. No. His eyes sharpened with something almost like interest. Until then, I think he had believed every objection I made was simply the first stage of my obedience. Tessa, I'll send completed locations. I'll send partials with notes. I won't certify the rest. I'm not asking you to certify anything. The invoice pulls from my completion report. Then change the report. I felt the red china marker against my ribs inside my shirt pocket. Grant opened his office door. "Wade will take bellwether operations," he said. "Give him your files before lunch." By the time I returned to my desk, my access to the bellwether scheduling folder had already been removed. I clicked the folder twice, as if the second attempt might convince the server I was still myself. Access denied. Across the office, Wade sat down at the unused estimator's desk with a laptop and one of his immaculate legal pads. "I need the physical packets," he said. "They're filed by service date. Can you bring them over? You know where the cabinet is." He smiled without looking up. "Grant asked you to make the transition smooth." "So did I. That's why they're filed." My mother made a small sound behind the payroll partition. It could have been a cough or a warning. I took Wade to the cabinet anyway. There were 42 bellwether folders because Grant insisted on including the license locations before they had signed service addendums. Each folder contained site contacts, equipment details, roof access instructions, photographs, and service sheets. Completed packets had the red diagonal line across the upper right corner. Partial jobs had a red dot. Locations we had not entered had no mark. Wade ran his finger along the tabs. "Why not scan all this?" "It is scanned." "Then why paper?" "Because wet gloves don't open PDFs." He pulled out the folder for the Harrisburg location. "What's the dot?" "Partial. The crew cleaned the main line but couldn't lift fan 3 safely. It needs a hinge kit. The app says complete." "The app means the crew closed the work order. So complete." "No, closed means they stopped the clock." He looked at me then. Wade wasn't stupid. That made conversations with him more tiring because his confusion usually had a purpose. "What does the contract define as complete?" he asked. "Clean to scope, photographed, accessible components inspected, manager acknowledgement. Does it say every recommended repair must be performed? No. So the hinge is a recommendation. The hinge is why they couldn't reach part of the duct." He opened the folder and saw Luis's blocky handwriting across the yellow sheet. "Unsafe to tilt fan. Return after repair." Wade shut it. "Grant wants you focused on local accounts for now." "What does 'for now' mean?" "It means you have plenty to do." By noon, Bellwether had vanished from my dashboard. In its place were 9 diners, 2 hotels, a bowling alley, and a retirement community whose kitchen manager liked to book service, cancel it, and then complain about the missed cleaning. It was real work. Grant knew I couldn't call it punishment without insulting every client still on my screen. At 12:30, Luis came in through the warehouse carrying a stack of damp packets inside a clear trash bag. He set them on my desk. "Those go to Wade now," I said. He says upload them. Then he can upload them. He also says don't write notes on the front because the customer can see. I looked through the plastic. My red dot was visible on the top packet. "Did you finish reading?" 2 fans. Third had no power at disconnect. Manager didn't know which breaker. "Did you photograph it?" 6 ways. I took the packet to Wade. He was eating almonds from a glass jar while talking through a headset about route consolidation. I waited until he ended the call. "Reading is partial." He held out his hand for the packet. "Great." "Not great. Partial." "I heard you. Your dashboard shows it green. It shows the crew visited. Green means ready to invoice, according to your system, according to the system billing uses." He glanced toward my mother's partition. "Then billing can ask questions." My mother did. At 4, she came to my desk with a printed invoice batch and shut the door behind her. My office barely deserved the name. It had once stored uniforms, and the door hit my chair if I leaned back too far. "Which of these are complete?" she asked. "Why are you asking me?" "Because Wade told me all 12. Wade owns the account." Tessa. I marked 7 invoice numbers with my red pencil. These 7 have signed completions. And these 5? 1 blocked roof, 2 partials, 2 not started. Grant approved the batch. Then why did you come in here? She aligned the pages against the edge of my desk. When your uncle is under pressure, he gets ahead of himself. That's a nice phrase for it. He catches up. By sending crews we don't have, we have always made things work. Making things work used to mean doing the job. Her mouth tightened. You think I don't know what an invoice is? I think you're asking me to make it easier for you. I'm asking whether this is worth turning the whole office against you. 5 of those invoices aren't true. They're progress billing. The contract doesn't allow progress billing. My mother picked up the pages. The peppermints in her pocket clicked against each other. Grant is trying to build something that could take care of all of us. He's trying to sell it. He's trying to stop carrying it alone. That sentence stayed in the small room after she left. Grant had carried plenty. I knew about the years he slept in the office between jobs. I knew he had lent Luis money when Luis's transmission failed and had never asked for the last 2 payments. When my mother needed surgery, Grant adjusted her hours and paid her full wages without mentioning it to anyone. He also knew gratitude could be made to perform almost any task if you applied pressure in the right place. The invoice batch went out the next morning. Dana called my direct line at 10:06. Did your team enter our West Reading roof last Thursday? I watched Wade through the glass wall. He was demonstrating something on his laptop to Grant. You'll need to speak with Wade Mercer, I said. He's managing the account now. I spoke with Wade. He said service was completed. What does your access log show? That no roof key was issued. Then I'd ask him for the completion photographs. I did. He sent me photographs from Reading. Those are different locations. I'm aware. Her voice stayed level, but each word seemed to arrive with its own clipboard. Were you removed from this account? She asked. Wade is managing it. That wasn't my question. I turned in my chair. My mother was looking at me over the payroll printer. Yes, I said. Why? You'd have to ask Grant. I am asking you. I disagreed with the completion reporting. Dana was silent long enough for me to hear someone in her office opening and closing a drawer. Do you have a record of the service status as of your handoff? I have the reports I prepared while I managed it. They belong to Pike. Did you send Bellwether any of those reports? Weekly, you were copied. Another pause. Forward me the last one you sent, she said. From your sent folder. I want the version Bellwether received, not a new document. That mattered. She wasn't asking me to carry records out the back door. She was asking for something already delivered to her company. I forwarded the email. Grant entered my office 11 minutes later and closed the door hard enough to bump my chair. What did you tell Dana? That Wade manages the account. What else? That I disagreed with the completion reporting. His nostrils widened. You discussed an internal disagreement with our largest client. She asked why I was removed. You say restructuring. That would be misleading. You seem very concerned about misleading people when it makes me look bad. You invoiced an unentered roof. We corrected the photo attachment. You can't correct a locked door with a photograph. He braced one hand on my desk. I gave you a career here. I've been paid for work. I hired you when every other employer saw a teenager. And then I learned the operation well enough that you gave me Bellwether. I gave you scheduling. Don't confuse proximity with authority. The words landed cleanly. Grant was good at that, too. He straightened and noticed my red china marker beside the keyboard. He picked it up, rolled it between his fingers, and laid it back down. You are not to contact Dana again, he said. If she contacts me, send her to Wade. And if she asks me a direct question, you work for me. Find an answer that reflects that. After he left, my mother came in with a peppermint already unwrapped. Don't, I said. She set it on my desk anyway. He's scared. So am I. You don't act scared. What does it look like? Like this. She gestured at me. The upright posture, the labeled binders, the marker placed parallel to the keyboard. I wanted to tell her that neatness was not calm. Sometimes it was only panic with straight edges. Instead, I picked up the peppermint and put it in my mouth. Grant's ban lasted 2 days. At 1:40 Friday morning, Louise called me from Bellwether's Lancaster location. Wade didn't answer. Grant's voicemail was full. The restaurant manager refused to let the crew begin because the work order listed 6 rooftop fans and the building had 7. One was added over the prep kitchen, Louise said. Looks newer. Is it on the same duct? I can't tell without opening it. Don't touch it yet. We already wrapped the line. Keep it wrapped. I called Dana because the contract required client authorization for equipment outside the listed scope. She answered on the 4th ring, awake enough to sound annoyed. Send me a picture, she said. Louise sent 12. The 7th fan served a tenant space Bellwether had taken over 3 months earlier. It belonged on the contract, but nobody had updated the equipment schedule. Dana authorized the additional cleaning in writing. I adjusted the crew's next stop, found a manager willing to move service by one night, and arranged for Vernon to bring extra plastic and degreaser from a nearby job. At 3:12, Grant called. Why is Lancaster still on the clock? Unlisted fan. Leave it. Dana authorized it. You called her? The crew needed a scope decision. I told you not to contact her. Then answer your phone. He hung up. At 8 the next morning, a red velvet box sat on my keyboard. Inside was the gold watch. It was light enough to feel hollow. A note on Grant's letterhead said, "For all the extra years." Wade stood at the coffee machine pretending not to watch me open it. What is this? Grant came out of his office carrying his travel mug. A peace offering. For what? Your sense of humor. I'm 21, which makes retirement funny. My mother was feeding paper into the printer 1 sheet at a time. She did not look up. Grant pointed at the box. Keep it. One day you'll appreciate the craftsmanship. The watchband pin fell out when I lifted it. Louise found that funnier than Grant expected. By Monday, Grant had turned the joke into policy. He asked whether I needed a nap when I questioned travel time. Wade offered to enlarge the print on my route sheets. Someone taped a handwritten, reserved for senior staff sign to my office chair. Small things, each easy to deny, each inviting me either to laugh or become the humorless woman they had already described. I kept the watch in its red box in my bottom drawer. Dana called again Tuesday afternoon. I have an unusual question, she said. Are you planning to stay at Pike? I looked through my doorway. Grant was in the warehouse showing 2 visitors our equipment racks. One of them wore a suit and kept taking photographs. I'm employed here, I said. That's not what I asked. I don't have another plan. Bellwether posted a vendor performance coordinator position this morning. My hand tightened around the receiver. If you're offering me a job, this is a bad way to do it. I'm not authorized to offer you anything. I'm telling you a public listing exists. And if I apply? You disclose your relationship to Pike. You do not bring pricing, bid information, customer lists, or internal files. You go through the same panel as everyone else. Why tell me? Because at 1:40 in the morning you protected your employer, my contract, and a crew standing in a greasy kitchen. Most people pick one. I looked at the red marker beside my mouse. What would the job actually do? Find the distance between what a vendor promised and what happened. I'm getting very experienced at that, I noticed. The posting closed Friday. I submitted my application Thursday night from my apartment, then sat at my kitchen table feeling disloyal, relieved, and slightly sick. The salary range started above what Grant paid me. The benefits were better. The requirements asked for 5 years of vendor experience or equivalent operational responsibility. I had 3 years, no impressive title, and an uncle who could make my work sound like answering phones. Bellwether invited me to interview the following Monday. Grant found out before I told my mother. He waited until the office emptied, then placed a severance agreement on my desk. The first paragraph described my resignation as voluntary. The fourth required me to keep confidential any concerns about Bellwether service. The last offered 2 weeks of pay, including the performance bonus he had withheld. You called them, I said. They called me to verify employment. You told them I resigned? I told them you appeared to be leaving. I applied for a job. with my client, with a public company that posted a public position. You really want to do this to your mother? My mother stood behind him in the doorway, pale and perfectly still. Grant slid the agreement closer. "Sign it," he said, "and we'll tell everyone you decided it was time to move on." I read the agreement all the way to the signature line. You left out the part where I agree the cake was funny. Grant's jaw shifted. My mother stepped into the office. "Tessa, take it home. Read it when you're not angry." "I'm not taking it anywhere." "You haven't even talked to anyone," she said. "I talked to Bellwether." Her face changed before she could stop it. Grant folded his arms. "There it is. I had an interview. That's all. With a client whose contract you damaged." "I didn't damage the contract. You told Dana we were behind." "We were behind. You gave her your private tracking system." I forwarded a report she had already received. Grant glanced at my mother, inviting her to notice how technical I was being, how guilty people always found a narrow word to stand on. He pushed a pen across my desk. "You can leave with 2 weeks' pay and your reputation intact." My reputation with whom? With this industry. It was a small industry. Restaurant owners changed groups. Managers became regional directors. Vendors traded crew members and grievances. Grant knew 3 people anywhere I might apply or could convince me he did. I picked up the severance agreement and placed it in his hands. "I'm not resigning." His fingers closed around the pages. "Then report to inventory tomorrow, 6 a.m. That's not my job. It is now." My mother followed me to the parking lot. The wind pushed chemical fumes from the warehouse vent across the cars. She buttoned her coat wrong, 1 button off, and kept it that way. "You could have taken the 2 weeks, she said, and said I left voluntarily. "You're trying to leave." That isn't the same as letting Grant fire me in past tense. He feels betrayed. I feel fired. You still have a job. In inventory. Louise started in inventory. Louise wanted to work on a crew. She rubbed her hands together. Grant paid me through my surgery. I know. He kept your aunt's house out of foreclosure. I know. He has done things for this family that you were too young to see. There it was again, my age, useful whenever my work stopped being easy to dismiss. What amount of money would make those 5 false invoices okay? I asked. She stared at me. I'm asking because you do payroll. Put a number on it. That's cruel. So is using your surgery to make me sign a lie? She stepped back as if I'd touched her. For 1 second, I almost apologized. Then she turned and walked inside with her coat still buttoned wrong. I spent the next morning counting hinge kits. Inventory was colder than the office and louder than it needed to be. The heater knocked every 7 minutes. I counted filters by size, belts by manufacturer, scraper blades by the box, and chemical drums by weight. Someone had written lemon in black marker on a drum of degreaser that smelled nothing like lemons. Luis came in at 8 carrying a damaged pressure washer hose. "You get promoted?" he asked. "Executive hinge kit coordinator. Congratulations." He laid the hose on the workbench and looked toward the office door. Grant told crews all job notes go through Wade. That makes sense if Wade's managing. He said we don't need yellow sheets if the app is closed. Keep using them. He said not to. Then make your own notes. Luis studied me. You leaving? I don't know. That means yes. It means I had 1 interview. Good. I didn't say I got anything. I said good because you had one. He picked up the damaged hose, then stopped. If they ask me about the work, I tell the truth. I'm not asking you to get involved. You think truth is getting involved only when it helps you? He slung the hose over one shoulder and left. Bellwether's second interview took place in a glass conference room overlooking a distribution yard. Trucks moved below us with restaurant names painted on their trailers. Dana sat at one end of the table but asked only 2 questions. The others came from procurement, human resources, and Marisol Hart, the chief operating officer. Marisol wore a navy suit and bright orange reading glasses. She turned my application sideways. You have 3 years of experience, she said. Yes. This position asks for 5. Yes, you didn't write equivalent experience in the box. The posting already said it. The procurement manager covered a smile with his hand. Marisol did not. Tell me about a vendor failure you caused. I could have chosen a harmless mistake. I told them about a hotel kitchen where I had scheduled service before confirming whether our hoses could reach the roof access. The crew lost an hour, the hotel paid overtime for a manager to stay, and Grant had to credit the visit. What did you change? Dana asked. I added hose distance estimates to every site profile. Did that solve it? No, people guessed. So I had crews photograph the route from the nearest water source during the site survey. The procurement manager leaned forward. You like documentation. I like not repeating expensive surprises. And yet your current employer appears to have a documentation dispute with us. Marisol's voice was mild. The room felt smaller. I can tell you what I personally completed and what I reported while I managed the account, I said. I can't characterize documents created after Grant removed me. Would you participate in a review of Pike exhaust if you worked here? Only if your conflict policy allowed it. What if your conclusion cost your uncle his company? I'd want someone without my last name making the final decision. That answer seemed to disappoint Dana and satisfy Marisol. They gave me an operations exercise. 6 restaurant locations, 4 vendor crews, 1 broken machine, 2 restricted access windows, and weather moving in from the west. I had 40 minutes. I finished in 28, then used the remaining 12 to mark where the facts were insufficient. Marisol stopped beside the page. You left 2 locations unscheduled. I'd rather show a gap than hide one. My third interview was with a regional vice president who asked how I handled difficult vendors. Usually by finding out what they're protecting, I said. And if they're protecting themselves? They still have a reason. Grant's reason arrived in the office wearing another tailored suit. The prospective buyer toured Pike on Thursday. Grant had the floor scrubbed, parked the newest vans in front, and moved the original van mirror from the warehouse shelf into the conference room. He mounted it beneath the photograph with a temporary brass plaque that read, "Where We Started." He could make a bent mirror look like a business strategy. While the buyer examined our route dashboard, Wade presented the bellwether account as fully current. From the inventory doorway, I watched green circles appear beside locations I knew were incomplete. Grant caught me watching. "Tessa," he called, "bring us the filter inventory summary." It was the only document in the building with my name still attached to it. I handed copies around the table. The buyer, a woman named Robin, studied mine longer than the others. "You reduced rush purchasing by 18%?" she asked. "By standardizing van stock." Grant rested a hand on the back of her chair. "Tessa's our details person." "Are you part of the family?" Robin asked. "Niece," Grant said before I could answer. "We're trying to convince her not to retire on us." Wade laughed. Grant smiled. Robin glanced from him to me. 21 is early, she said. "Old soul," Grant replied. I returned to inventory without giving him what he wanted. The offer came the following Tuesday at 8:17 in the morning. Marisol called before sending it. She said the panel had selected me unanimously, then spent 5 full minutes explaining the conflict disclosure. I would have no role in awarding Pike new work. Any corrective review involving Pike would include an independent procurement lead, and final authority would remain with Dana and Marisol until the conflict cleared. "You'll still administer the process," she said. "You just won't score your uncle." "That's fair. It may not feel fair." I'm not applying for a feeling. The offer arrived while I was sitting in my car outside Pike. I read it 3 times. The salary was higher than I had expected. The start date was the following Monday. Attached to the role description was Bellwether's delegation matrix, giving vendor performance coordinators authority to demand documentation, issue corrective action plans, and recommend suspension or reduction of work. I didn't sign immediately. Inside, the retirement sign was still taped to my chair. The gold watch waited in my bottom drawer. My mother's desk lamp glowed behind the partition, but she didn't look up when I passed. Grant had scheduled a team lunch for Friday. Attendance was strongly encouraged. When I asked what it was for, Wade said Grant wanted to reset the mood. At 10, my mother entered inventory with a roll of payroll checks. "Are you taking the bellwether job?" she asked. "If they offer it." They called Grant again. "He isn't supposed to discuss my application. They verified dates." "Did he tell them I resigned?" She looked at the chemical drums instead of me. "He told them you were unhappy and had become fixated on the bellwether account. Do you agree? I think you've made this impossible for yourself." "That isn't an answer." "What do you want me to say? That he's wrong about everything?" "He isn't. You're rigid. You make people feel like every mistake is a character test." I swallowed. She went on because stopping would have required tenderness. "Grant likes being the person who saves things. You like being the person who catches things. You're more alike than either of you can stand." "Did you send those invoices?" "Yes." The word hurt more because she didn't decorate it. "Why?" "Because Grant approved them and he owns the company. You knew they were wrong. I knew we were going to complete the work. That wasn't the question." "No," she said, "it wasn't." She left the checks on a shelf and walked out. I signed Bellwether's offer at 10:43. The next morning, Grant had my desk packed into 2 copy paper boxes. He didn't fire me. He simply moved the boxes beside the conference room door where everyone could see them. "One way or another, you're leaving," he said. I took my red china marker from the top box and clipped it into my pocket. At the restaurant Friday, Grant argued with the hostess because she had put us at 2 tables instead of 1. While he negotiated, I slid a cream-colored envelope beside his plate. I wrote his name on it in red and tucked it next to the gold watch he had brought from my drawer. By the time he finished reading the first page and asked what I had done, the frosting had begun to soften under the dining room lights. "I got a job," I said, "with my client, with my employer. You haven't started. The offer is signed." He turned to the delegation matrix. I watched his eyes stop at corrective action authority. Wade leaned close enough to read over his shoulder. Grant lowered the pages. "You think this makes you my boss?" "No. You're going to use their contract to punish me?" "My conflict is disclosed. I won't score Pike." That seemed to bother him more than a threat would have. Luis reached for the coffee pot. My mother sat with both hands in her lap. Grant looked around the table and remembered he had assembled an audience. "Well," he said, his smile returning by force, "then I guess the retirement is official." He lifted the gold watch and held it toward me. I left it in his hand. When we returned to Pike, my system login no longer worked at all. My badge opened the front door, but not the warehouse. The 2 boxes from my desk were waiting on the sidewalk. My mother stood inside the glass door. I expected her to unlock it. Instead, she pressed her palm to the glass. "I couldn't stop him," she said through the door. "You process payroll." "That doesn't mean I own the locks." "No, it just means you know who changed them." Her palm slid down. I carried both boxes to my car without asking Luis for help. The heavier one split at the bottom as I lifted it into the trunk. Pens, notebooks, and the red velvet watch box spilled across the pavement. The box was empty. Grant had kept the watch. I started at Bellwether on Monday. For the first week, I reviewed contracts that had nothing to do with grease or rooftops, refrigeration maintenance, parking lot striping, cooking oil collection. I learned Bellwether's purchasing system, its escalation rules, and how often a polished report concealed a manager who had spent 3 hours waiting for a vendor. Dana gave me Pike's corrective file on Friday. "Read it," she said. "Don't score it." Grant's response was 37 pages long. He blamed inconsistent site access, outdated equipment lists, and administrative interference by a former junior employee. He included photographs of completed reservists at 3 locations and a spreadsheet showing 1 error in a schedule I had sent. A licensed location listed on the wrong service week. He had found a real mistake. Attached was a letter from his attorney accusing me of retaining proprietary records and using bellwether authority to damage a family business. Dana watched me finish. Is any of that true? The scheduling error is. The rest? I retained my pay stubs and personal notes. The operational reports are in Bellwether's email because I sent them while I worked for Pike. Grant is requesting that you be removed from all matters involving his company. He should. Dana frowned. You agree? If he can make this about me, he never has to make it about the invoices. By Monday, Pike's review had been assigned to Martin Shaw in procurement. He chose 6 locations for independent verification, including 2 Grant had reserviced. I helped design the checklist, then remove my name from it. Grant responded by calling Marisol directly. He offered immediate credits. He offered free service. He offered to replace Wade as account lead and report personally to Dana. He was persuasive enough that Bellwether paused any contract reduction until the verification was complete. That night, Luis sent the regular operations mailbox a repair estimate for the Harrisburg hinge kit. Wade rejected it as already resolved. Luis forwarded the rejection to Bellwether. At the bottom, he added one sentence. Fan still cannot be safely opened. The next morning, Grant arrived in Bellwether's lobby carrying 3 polished binders and the bent chrome mirror from his first van mounted on its new plaque. He had come prepared to tell everyone where he started. Martin set the binders on the conference table. Then he placed the 6 site access logs beside them. Grant placed the chrome mirror at the end of the table, angled so the little brass plaque faced Marisol. Martin looked at it, then at Grant. It's from my first van, Grant said. I brought it because context matters. It usually does, Martin replied. Dana sat beside him with a legal pad. I sat against the wall, away from the table, with the Pike file closed on my lap. I was there to explain Bellwether's process if asked. I had no vote and no scoring sheet. Wade opened the first binder. Each location had a tab, a glossy photograph, a completed work order, and a 1-page narrative explaining the service delay. The narratives blamed roof access most often, equipment records second, and weather twice. Grant was good. He admitted small failures before anyone could accuse him of larger ones. He acknowledged that Wade had attached the wrong reading photographs. He pointed out the extra fan in Lancaster and Bellwether's outdated equipment schedule. He accepted responsibility for communication gaps while making the actual work sound complete. Pike has served restaurants for 18 years, he said. We solve problems in the field. Sometimes paperwork trails performance. Martin opened the West Reading tab. This says service was completed on March 14th. Correct. The restaurant's roof access log shows no entry by Pike that night. The manager may have failed to log the key. The key cabinet records the code used. Grant leaned closer. Those systems aren't perfect. Your completion photograph shows a red brick parapet. I'd have to ask the crew. West Reading has a white membrane roof and no parapet. The photograph is from Reading. Wade stopped turning pages. Grant glanced at him, then returned his attention to Martin. That was the attachment error I just acknowledged. The attachment error was on the original invoice. You submitted the same photograph in this review. Martin slid the picture out of its plastic sleeve. The date printed beneath it was March 14th. In the lower corner, partly obscured by a fan housing, was the green awning of the building next door to the reading location. Grant folded his hands. All right, we'll credit that service. Martin opened the second binder. Harrisburg. The work was completed after the hinge repair. Who repaired the hinge? One of our field technicians. Which one? I don't manage individual crew assignments. Luis's repair estimate lay beneath the access log. It had been submitted 3 days after the date in Grant's binder. Wade's rejection appeared on the next page. Already resolved, no parts authorized. Martin placed Luis's email beside it. Fan still cannot be safely opened. The independent verifier went up yesterday, he said. The hinge is still bent. Grease remains in the section your crew reported inaccessible. Grant turned toward me. This is exactly the problem. Your new employee is building a case from notes she created while working for me. I didn't select Harrisburg, I said. You designed the checklist. I designed a checklist for exhaust service verification. Martin chose the sites. You knew which questions would produce the result you wanted. Dana put down her pen. She asked whether the fan could be safely opened. What question would you prefer? Grant ignored her. He pointed to the folders on my lap. Those records belong to Pike. The records in Tessa's file came from Bellwether's email archive, Martin said. Your company sent them to us during service, through an employee acting outside her authority. She was our designated operational contact when she sent them. Wade whispered something to Grant. Grant shook his head once. Martin brought up the weekly report Dana had asked me to forward. It appeared on the wall monitor exactly as it had left my sent folder. Location, scheduled date, access status, work status, repair needs. 7 locations showed my red diagonal line beside the packet numbers. 5 had red dots. Grant studied the screen. That is her personal notation, he said. It has no contractual meaning. Correct, Martin said. So we didn't rely on it. He displayed the access records beside the report. Each red-lined location had a roof entry, matching photographs, and a manager acknowledgement. Each red dot location lacked at least one required item. 2 had no roof access. 2 had partial service notes. 1 had not been started. Then he added the invoice dates. 4 of the 5 had been billed as complete before the missing access or reservice ever occurred. The red marks did not prove the jobs were incomplete. The roof logs, photographs, signatures, and crew notes did that. The marks proved I had distinguished them before billing. Grant looked at me again. The anger had gone quieter. You planned this. I planned routes. You built your own evidence system. I kept job packets. Because you expected me to fail. Because managers forget keys and fan hinges bend. His expression flickered at that. The ordinary answer denied him the fight he wanted. Marisol turned to Martin. What did the site verification find? 3 of 6 locations are fully compliant now. 1 requires minor follow-up. Harrisburg remains partial. West Reading shows no evidence of the invoice service. Lancaster? Complete, including the 7th fan. Bellwether's equipment schedule was wrong. Grant seized that opening, which is what I've been saying. We were given bad information, restricted access, and an impossible rollout. An 8-week rollout your proposal offered, Dana said. A proposal based on your site data. You had a phased alternative. For the first time, Grant looked uncertain. I had never sent my original draft to Dana. There had been no reason. The phased version was internal. Wade slowly closed the 3rd binder. Dana watched him. Mr. Mercer mentioned it during his interview yesterday. Grant turned toward Wade. Wade's face reddened. They asked whether there were other schedules. You interviewed with Bellwether? For the corrective review, Wade said. They said they needed to understand the proposal process. You spoke to my client without me. The sentence landed with enough force that even Grant heard its familiarity. Wade looked down at the binder. They called me. For a moment, I saw what Grant must have seen at the lunch table when he opened my envelope. Not one betrayal, but a room full of people he had mistaken for extensions of himself. Marisol removed her orange glasses. Bellwether shares responsibility for the incorrect equipment list at Lancaster and inconsistent access procedures at 4 locations. Those issues will be corrected. They do not explain invoicing locations your crews did not enter. Grant's voice hardened. What are you proposing? Martin slid a 2-page corrective action plan across the table. Pike would issue credits for unverified work. Its contract would be reduced from all 42 locations to 18, clustered around the crews that had performed reliably. Every completed service would require matched roof access, time-stamped photographs, and manager acknowledgement. The remaining locations would be divided between 2 other vendors for 6 months. Pike could compete to regain them after 2 successful quarterly reviews. Grant read the first page. You're cutting more than half the account. You completed less than the full scope you billed, Marisol said. You'll damage a local company over paperwork. We're preserving 18 locations because your field crews did good work when given enough time. Grant looked at the corrective plan, then at me. This was your recommendation. No. Your name is all over it. My name isn't on either page. That was the price of recusing myself. I could not claim the decision. I also could not be blamed for inventing it. Grant's eyes dropped to my shirt pocket. I still carried the red China marker, though my new job lived almost entirely on a laptop. Do I have a choice? He asked. Dana answered. You can accept the plan or Bellwether can terminate for unsupported billing. He signed. The chrome mirror caught the conference room lights as he stood. For an instant, the plaque beneath it reflected backward in the glass. Where we started. Grant left it on the table. The credits were due within 10 business days. On the 9th, my mother called me for the first time since the restaurant. Are you at work? She asked. Yes. I left Pike. I walked into an empty supply room and closed the door. What happened? Grant wanted the Bellwether credits dated in the prior month, before the buyer's review. And you said no. I said the service wasn't disputed then. It was the kind of answer she would have trained me to give. Factual, narrow, impossible to bend without breaking. Did he fire you? I resigned. The distinction mattered to her. I let it. Do you have enough money? I asked. For a while. What about insurance? I can continue it. It will be expensive. I can help, she breathed out. I'm not calling for money. Why are you calling? The pause lasted so long I checked the screen to see whether we were still connected. Because you were right about the invoices, she said, and I knew it before I sent them. My hand tightened around the phone. I kept telling myself the crews would catch up, so the dates were temporary. Then Grant kept moving the date when it would all become true. I leaned against a shelf of paper towels. You could have told him no. Yes. You could have unlocked the door. Yes. The word came softer. I was angry with you for making a choice I was afraid to make, she said. I wanted the apology to fix more than it did. It did not erase her palm against the glass or the boxes on the sidewalk. It did, however, leave us somewhere honest. I'll come by tonight, I said. I have peppermints. You always have peppermints. I took the bowl. That made me laugh before I could decide whether I wanted to. Robin's revised purchase offer arrived at Pike the following week. I knew only what became common knowledge among the vendors. The reduced Bellwether revenue lowered the price, and the new offer required Grant to remain for 2 years instead of cashing out immediately. He did not lose the company. He lost the clean exit he had been arranging with everyone else's labor. Wade moved back to sales. Luis agreed to become field operations manager only after Grant put scheduling authority in writing. His first route calendar covered 18 Bellwether locations over a realistic cycle, with hinge repairs separated from cleaning visits and travel time visible between every stop. He emailed it to Bellwether at 4:52 on a Friday. At 4:58, he sent me a second message. Look, I have authority. Attached was a photograph of a label he had stuck to the office stapler, property of Grandma Tessa. I approved Pike's first corrective report for administrative completeness, not performance. Martin did the scoring. 18 locations became 19 after a clean quarter, then 21 after the next. Grant came to the second quarterly review alone. He carried one binder, no mirror, no speeches about where he started. When he sat across from me, he placed the binder precisely in the center of the table. Luis says this schedule is the maximum we can service, he said. Do you agree with him? I'm learning to. I reviewed the report. Access records matched. Photographs matched. Manager acknowledgments matched. Harrisburg's new hinge kit appeared in 3 pictures, open and stable, with the previously unreachable duct cleaned behind it. At the bottom of the final page was a blank acknowledgement line. I took the red china marker from my pocket. Grant watched me draw one diagonal line across the upper right corner. The sound was faint, wax dragging over paper. His eyes moved from the mark to my face. "Complete?" he asked. "Complete." I slid the binder back across the table. This time, he waited until it reached him before he put out his hand.